Hello and welcome to the Pardeux Raids Guide Strategy Guide for defeating Elegon. I'm Pardeux and I'll be walking you through the 5th encounter in normal mode Mogushan Vaults. Mogushan Vaults is the first new raid in Tier 14 raiding tier. The raid has been out for a total of 3 days now, and this boss has proven to challenge even some of the higher end guilds that expected to roll over the content. The reason for this is that the damage requirements are very high, as well as the requirements for precise execution and near perfect play. Keeping that in mind, let's jump into the specifics of this boss encounter. The fight is a sequential fight that consists of 2 rounds of 3 phases, followed by an intense burn phase. If you remember Alice Resort from Firelands, this fight might feel familiar. The first and possibly most important ability throughout the entire encounter is the buff called Touch of the Titans. This buff grants a 50% bonus to damage and healing received. You get this buff by standing inside of the circle within the room. While this buff sounds great, it does have a negative side effect. Every few seconds you stand in the circle, you gain a debuff called Overcharged, which will increase the damage taken by 5% per stack. Players should aim to never have more than 6 to 9 debuff stacks at a time. Next, we will cover the second phase called the Primary Power Offline phase. The second phase begins when the boss is at 85% health, and will occur again at 50% health. The power is out and Elegon wants to get it back up and running, so he will spawn 6 adds named Energy Charge. These charges will spawn under the boss and move radially outward towards each pillar, at the edge of the circle. The phase ends if a charge touches one of the pillars. The boss gains a stacking debuff that makes him take 10% additional damage for every set of adds that he spawns. This means that you want to destroy all 6 charges as often as possible. Utilize DPS cooldowns to achieve a minimum of 5 or 6 waves. It is recommended to destroy at least 5 rounds of adds every time. If you miss this benchmark, you will likely die to the enrage. DPS should be assigned to a charge. For a 10-man, 1 DPS per charge, and a 25-man, it will be around 3 per charge. When the charge is destroyed, DPS should switch and help others when possible. Also note, they get faster as each wave that spawns, so as time goes on, they're going to reach the pillars. Also note that DPS can pre-AoE near the center, and all players still need to be resetting their overload stacks between rounds. Once a charge reaches a pillar, and the phase ends, the raid needs to get outside of the circle and prepare for the third phase. During the third phase, players will want to destroy the pillars, which are called Imperial Focus. You will immediately notice arcane fire connecting the pillars to the outer wall. Do not stand in this or attempt to cross it, it will kill you. The boss will cast Energy Cascade, which places purple zones on the ground and deal a near-lethal hit, so avoid these. After impact, these zones will create an add called Cosmic Spark. Tanks will want to pick up these adds, and DPS will ignore them until the pillars are destroyed. The Imperial Focus pillars need to be destroyed around the same time, since the fire will not despawn until the other linked focus is also destroyed. The boss also gains a 20% buff to damage and casting speed for each focus destroyed. Therefore, it is important to have your DPS as balanced as possible and destroy the focus as close to the same time as possible. Priority on the middle pillar is important so that players have more room to move and the tanks can pick up the Cosmic Spark adds quickly. Once pillars are down, prepare to restart back at phase 1, this time with the boss dealing 120% more damage and casting 120% more quickly. In phase 1, the boss has 3 main abilities that we will deal with. First is a Celestial Breath, typical of dragon bosses. Tank them facing away from the raid. Due to the high amount of damage, tanks will need to ensure that they have minimal stacks of overload and will want to use cooldowns when the boss is doing even more damage later in the fight. The boss will also death grip the entire raid in if nobody is in melee range, so this means tanks need to run in quickly at phase transitions, and forces the raid to use 2 tanks in the fight. The final and most difficult part of the phase 1 is the Celestial Protector add. The Celestial Protector phases, reducing damage when outside of the circle, so it needs to be tanked inside of the circle until it is at 25% health. At that point, it will begin emitting heavy AoE and should be moved outside of the circle and burned down quickly. The reason for this is because at 0%, the ad will cause total annihilation, which does a strong burst of damage to the entire raid. Ideally, everyone should reset stacks before total annihilation is cast, and the raid should be topped, healing cooldowns rotated to deal with the damage. Since melee peel off to attack the protector, this is an ideal time for them to reset stacks as well. I will reiterate that it is vital to burn down the ad quickly from 25% to 0 so that healers do not get overwhelmed and the raid will survive the total annihilation. The ad also emits arcing energy, which targets random players for significant damage and reduces their healing taken by 25% for 20 seconds. The debuff can be dispelled, so coordinate healers and ensure that the players get topped off. In the first Phase 1, the raid should get the boss under 80% health before the third Celestial Protector spawns. In the second Phase 1, the raid can allow 3 Protectors to spawn. Note that you do not want to enter Phase 2 with a Celestial Protector alive, so throttle your DPS accordingly. The final phase is a burn phase. In Phase 4, the boss casts Radiating Energies, which will tick significant arcane damage to the entire raid. If you are outside of the circle, you will be killed by this ability, so stack on the boss and chain healing cooldowns. This is the ideal time for Bloodlust as well. The raid should have approximately 60 seconds to kill the boss. This phase is all about killing him before he kills you, so be smart about your cooldown rotation and you should have a kill. The key is really in setting up this phase. If the boss is taking 100 to 120% more damage, then you should be able to beat the Enrage. If you handled the charges in Phase 2 poorly, this is where you won't be able to beat the timer. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the PardeuxRaids.com raid guides. I hope this video has been helpful and that your raid succeeds. Keep checking my website for updates, class guides, blog topics, and future strategy guides that aim to meet the raiding needs of raiders at every level. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Twitter @PardeuxRaids.